I can't believe it. I'm like reluctant to turn the AC on. I'm like, I can't turn the AC on now, but I'm feeling it a little bit. I can't believe it. I'm like reluctant to turn the AC on. I'm like, I can't turn the AC on now. This is because it goes on YouTube. Feeling it a little bit. A little bit of a luck.
It's serious.
All right. Let me just do this quickly. Mezuzahs. Yeah, so some Hasidim they said that the reason why the Rebbe would always tell everyone to check their mezuzah was because the Rebbe wanted people to look at the first source of anything in your life and look spiritual. It looks to God. In other words, when you get sick or something, a tragedy or something, the first place you should check is with this. Because that's like a spirit, that's a way, because whatever you do, you need God's help. So there were certain times the Rebbe said, ideally, you should check your mezuzahs every year. Now, I don't do that because there's no scribe in Arizona, but there's one moving this year who hasn't moved yet. He was supposed to move in December, but he didn't. Not to Prescott, Phoenix. You need it. Welcome. Don't worry. Sorry.
Neither one for your Jesus.
Okay. Oh, this one's gonna really be exciting one. This one's gonna really
9
wire everyone up.
9.5. 7.
I'll put more rounds in the last.
0 6. 60.
Have a video here.
Yeah. No, next week is perfect. I know.
Sorry, I don't water.
Rabbi. Yes, this is about the guy replacing the rabbi.
Yes.
I have a question.
I know. You think it's a conspiracy if we go again? No, I'm just kidding.
No, well,
Yeah.
the rabbi pick on me as effectively as you do, is what I want.
We'll see. We'll take that into account. We'll take that into an account here. So yeah, ideally you should check your mezuzah every year. We, even though we don't get to do it every year, we try to check it whenever my wife is pregnant. We check our mezuzahs. Whenever you move to a new house, you're supposed to check your mezuzahs. In Jewish law, it says you're supposed to check your mezuzahs twice every 7 years. Now I get very expensive mezuzahs, and when I got married, someone said, you're just you and your wife, and you have wedding gifts, buy expensive mezuzahs. So whenever you move or whatever it is, you only have to add on one. You don't have to, because expensive mezuzahs nowadays could run for about $300. Now I will tell you, rain got into my mezuzahs a couple years ago and ruined one of them. And monsoon here, yeah, and I even had the cases you got on your mezuzah are special rainproof cases, but somehow it still got in. I checked them, and everybody in Chabad knows somebody who has some sort of story tied with their mezuzahs. And it's important to note, when you live in Prescott, it might sound like funny, but if you go to a place like Brooklyn, everybody knows about checking mezuzahs. I mean, everyone knows about checking mezuzahs and different things. Yes.
Check.
So when a scribe checks his mezuzahs, he's checking that the letters form is correct. There's no letters touching, and there are no type mistakes. Now nowadays they stick it into a computer as well, AI. But there's advantages of AI over humans, but there's advantages of humans over AI. So they our Torah. We bought a Torah. It was computer checked. It cost about $3,000 to check with the computer, and we found a mistake that the computer missed. Now, how did the computer miss it? Well, a computer cannot write a Torah. It can just find mistakes. So what happened was the scribe. What happened was the scribe basically found a mistake, which when you write Torahs, there's many mistakes, and then they keep editing it until they fix all of them. He found the mistake, he erased it, and then he wrote it wrong. So the computer checked it, he found it, he erased it, because you can tell when they erase something, and then he wrote it wrong. So I sent it back to New York, and the person scanned it in, the scribe there scanned it in. I didn't have to pay for it because, I already paid for the Torah. He was responsible for it. And then he sent it to a company in Israel that uses certain software that was able to make sure to fix the problem and find all the problems. So when they look through, mezuzahs in particular, there are sometimes typographical errors. Like one of the mezuzahs you gave me was a nice one, about the same nice as the ones you guys got, but it got water damage in it. Now, I don't think it was not kosher. Like I can check mezuzahs superficially. I'm not dumb, I can see, read it and everything. But hello, welcome. But I could tell you that mezuzah got water damage. Now, typically now there are scams. Like some of those mezuzahs are printed. Where do people scam with mezuzahs? In Israel, one thing that you could take from this course, I think is an important thing to take from this course, is how important Jewish law is to Jews. Now you can go and say, oh, I'm not so observant or whatever it is. But it's important to know how into Jewish law your ancestors were. And when I'm talking ancestors, I'm talking like 100 years ago. They were so careful about it. It was the most important thing in their life. It was the most important thing in their life. So like we can be like, oh, who cares if I keep Shabbat or not? But don't deny that there are Jews who take it very seriously. And there were always Jews who took it very seriously until like maybe 200 years ago, where Jews stopped taking it seriously. Welcome. Jews stopped taking it seriously. And then it's like, we're living right now in a bubble right now, I think in history, where people don't necessarily take Jewish law seriously, but it's coming back already. It's coming back. People are coming back, or people who don't take it seriously are just getting old and dying. And then, it's up to the youth. So that's one thing you take from this course. So when it comes to mezuzahs and tefillin, that's one thing that whoever writes it, when you pay like high end, or when you pay for a mezuzah, the main thing you're paying for is that the guy who wrote it is God-fearing. Because if he is not God-fearing, it will not be kosher, and you will never know. He'll literally sell you the Brooklyn Bridge. He'll say, here, I wrote this mezuzah, really nice. So in Israel, there have been companies, so there are people who sell on Amazon. Tefillin nowadays are about $700 a pair, but a couple years ago, they were $400 pre-COVID. And someone was buying one here, and he said, why don't I just buy this one on Amazon? It's $150. I told him, I said, read the reviews. That's why. Right? Read the reviews. I mean, on Amazon, you could buy a vegan tefillin for $340. There's no such thing as vegan tefillin. Tefillin are made out of leather. There's no such thing, right? So are there people now, a lot of these people, they have good intentions. They're like, oh, you want the traditional mezuzah? It's only tradition anyways. So in Israel, there have been people who hired non-Jews, because in Israel, if you hire sometimes non-Jews, you can get it cheap. Because if you hire a Jew, he's going to be a real scribe. It's going to cost a lot of money. But if you can train a non-Jew not to know any laws, or a minimum wage person to write it perfectly, but he doesn't know the laws behind it, it's not kosher. It's not kosher. So there's all sorts of scams. Last year, amazing, a guy in Brooklyn was checking mezuzahs, he was looking at like high-end ones, maybe $200, $300 each. And he is an experienced scribe. And he's like, these are too perfect. Everyone knows that when you write a mezuzah, you can trace by people's graphology. You can see slight differences that we cannot, our human eye cannot, but scribes know. I mean, they could see it in a second. It's almost like my wife can tell who's wearing a wig in a second and who's not, right? Because she knows, So, the scribe says, can't be 3 mezuzahs exactly the same, can't be. So he called an organization in Israel. They broke into the guy's house with police, and they found he had made some sort of printer that printed perfect mezuzahs. So those mezuzahs were not kosher. I'll just share one more story about mezuzahs. To give background, there was a Chabad rabbi 2 years ago who bought very high-end mezuzahs, and his wife gave birth to a baby, and she was very sick. The wife was very sick, recovered. She had an infection. 6 months later, a surgery. The infection came back. Things weren't fixing. So they had their mezuzahs checked. Meanwhile, to be a scribe, you have to be very careful in Jewish law. If a scribe says like, oh, I don't keep Shabbat, then his mezuzah is not kosher. Because how do you know he cares about mezuzahs if he doesn't keep Shabbat, right? He has to keep every law. If there's any law he overrides, then we can't trust his mezuzahs, right? Because a scribe and a shochet, when you go to Trader Joe's and you buy kosher meat, you don't know who the guy is, right? He could be Stan Keppert. Now, you don't know who the guy is, right? You don't know you're trusting someone to say, I know this guy is familiar with the laws. Meat looks the same once it's processed. So anyways, there was a guy in Ukraine who wrote amazing mezuzahs at a cheap price. And there was somebody who suspected, they said, it's really interesting. Now, if you want to write a mezuzah, you have to go to a mikveh every day. You have to go into immersion waters every day you write. And they said, wait, this guy lives in some town in Ukraine. That's an hour and a half away from the nearest mikveh. Could it really be that he goes? Could it really be that he goes? So people called, oh, yeah, I go every day. So he called the rabbi who's in charge of that mikveh and said, do you see this guy every day? Because he's pumping out a lot of, no, I never see him once, twice a year. So they found out that the guy's perfect mezuzahs were not kosher because he wasn't going, not only that, but he was actually living at the time with a non-Jew and he wasn't keeping kosher Shabbos or anything. But in picture, he looked like a holy Jew, a religious Jew and everything like that. So a bunch of scribes got together and they said, look, his mezuzahs are perfect, but everybody has their own slight variation just because we're human and they're written by humans. They're not made by computers. So they went and they picked out carefully all his slight variations. And they said, anyone who does not know in this class mezuzah, et cetera, who does not know who wrote it, bring them in. And they checked them and they found all of them. Anyways, this rabbi, Chabad rabbi I know, his wife was suffering for over 6 months. She got surgeries and she kept getting infected. They couldn't explain it. They sent their mezuzahs to New York. Now it's hard because you can't send your mezuzahs. You got to mail them. And they said they're from this scribe. You got to fix them. Anyways, they fixed them. And days later, the infection went away. True story. I know the person is. You can read it online. Days later, the infection went away. They fixed them. So here is an example where you have a fully kosher mezuzah. That if I would see it, someone like me who's not a scribe, I would be like, wow, $199 instead of $299. Well, that's amazing. What a deal. And yet, because it wasn't written according to Jewish law, it had a negative effect. Yes. Question. We'll take 2 questions and then, yeah. No, go for it.
Fix it.
No, those ones you got to replace. Those ones you got to replace. There's sometimes you can fix it. Sometimes you need to replace it. Yeah.
Exterior door. And I wrap it up in saran wrap.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, good.
Yeah, absolutely. So the mezuzah cases that they have now, they're supposed to be waterproof, but water got into one of my mezuzahs, ruined an expensive mezuzah I had. And from the monsoons. And so I started just putting a little piece of tape underneath it. If you use the clear cases, I put a little piece of tape, just, make sure no water gets in there. Okay. Welcome everybody to lesson 6 of Captivating Cases in Rabbinic Responsa. We've really gone through the journey of going through a lot of rabbinic response here. We went through a lot of fascinating information. Tonight, we are going to go through even more fascinating information. We're going to change the subject a little bit. We're going to explore a new subject that we haven't really explored so far. Until now, we said, you study responsa, you'll get a front row view of history, Jewish history. We're going to see all sorts of little stories and ideas and learn about rabbis, get to know them. We're going to get to know the problems people deal with. But till now, everything we did was from the past. We did responsa that were almost 1,000 years old. We did responsa from all different ages, right? So tonight we're going to enter a new genre, and this is exploring futuristic responsa. Futuristic responsa. This is a fascinating subject that I bet some of you are going to not want to leave tonight. Practically going to be like, oh my gosh, no, we got to get to the bottom of this. Now, it's notable that in Judaism, we believe that the Torah is not something which gives us meaning in life. The Torah is actually the blueprint of the universe. So what came first, the Torah or the universe? So we believe the Torah came first. That's what it says in the Torah, but we believe the Torah came first. And God used the Torah as the blueprint for the universe. So there's nothing new that's not in Torah. Everything is in Torah, hidden in Torah, hinted to in Torah, in one way or another. Now, not necessarily can we always extrapolate it properly, because the Torah is a book, divine book from God, and we are only human, right? We are only human, so we can only get what we can get out of it. There are some different interesting subjects nowadays. There's computer programs that do what's called Torah code, which can predict things and do all those things. Now, while that's pretty cool and it's a pretty nifty trick, not necessarily is it right because it's a human-made way of observing the Torah, of reading the Torah. Now, so therefore, when there's new innovations in the world, some people will say, oh, the Torah is so old, it's obsolete. But in fact, according to the Torah, there's no such thing as anything being obsolete. Everything in the world is here for the Torah, to build a relationship with the Torah. And therefore, in Jewish law, we don't just review old cases, but we have to always be able to apply them to new modern cases in technology and in everything like that. So we're going to go through today's schedule. We're going to have two parts. We're going to go through some heavy examples of engaging with emerging innovations. Now, unfortunately, we're not going to come to a final answer on these because a lot of times the final answer, as we'll see, is not clear. And there's so many variables. But we're going to enter and see what the rabbis discuss. And these are modern rabbis to nowadays, using the tools that we have based on old things, right? Old ideas. 100 years ago, I mean, they didn't even have cars. 100 years ago, they had cars. 200 years ago, they didn't have cars, right? So we're going to go through a bunch of questions today. It's really going to be fascinating. Our next section, we are going to talk about something which is important to my heart. Well, Rabbi, we know that AI is going to replace doctors, replace a lot of different businesses, right? The question is, will AI replace rabbis? Will AI replace rabbis? Now, I'm a little biased on the subject, but we're going to discuss some very interesting ideas of if AI will replace rabbis or not, and that's what we're going to do today. And it's going to be very, very fascinating. We're going to bring up some questions which I've peppered some of the lessons with. Maybe I've alluded to it, and we'll kind of go out with them head on. So for starters, we'll start with space tourism. So anyone here go to space yet? Well, nowadays there's a few companies you can go to space with, right? Anyone know any companies? You got SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin, and for only a couple $100,000, you can go to space nowadays. Now, space tourism is a real thing. A little bit more for 250,000, you could try to go to the Titanic, but we're not going to discuss that today. We're going to talk about going to space. Now, there are two types of potential ways of going to space. From now on, what's been done is suborbital flights, right? That means that's what you see like a bunch of celebrities do or whatever it is, a bunch of rich people. They go 100 kilometers off planet Earth and they see the world and there's zero gravity for a few minutes and then they come back down. Then you have SpaceX. SpaceX has a broader vision. They want to actually make space travel orbital, go around the world. Now, it's very expensive, but this is a new subject which rabbis talk about, and we'll see soon. But first, let's hear a little bit, get the facts straight.
Space tourism, no longer science fiction, but science fact. Newly minted astronauts include tycoons Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson, and celebrities such as actor William Shatner.
I'm Captain James T. Kirk, commanding the Starship Enterprise.
Of Star Trek fame.
The most profound experience.
Two companies, Bezos' Blue Origin and Branson's Virgin Galactic, will rocket you to the edge of space and back. It's a suborbital joyride, 50 to 60 miles above Earth, with a total trip time up and down lasting as little as 11 minutes. Nearly 120 people have launched with the two companies so far.
These are purely civilian flyers in most cases, and you have to call that space tourism.
And doing it for fun.
Yeah, pretty much doing it for fun. You're getting your 4 minutes of weightlessness. You're getting a view of the Earth that only astronauts have ever gotten before.
In 2022, mountaineer Vanessa O'Brien flew to the edge of space with Blue Origin and loved it.
You are able to see something that is so precious. It was seeing that blue marble from above. And it translates into a sense of almost responsibility and an appreciation that we really are all connected, that it is one planet.
Elon Musk's SpaceX offers next-level orbital adventuring. In 2021, billionaire Jared Isaacman financed Inspiration 4, an all-civilian crew of 4. They orbited Earth for 3 days. Another space company, Axiom, has chartered civilians all the way to the International Space Station. Ticket prices are reportedly stratospheric, roughly $500,000 per passenger for an up and down trip. Somewhere around $200 million to charter a SpaceX capsule into orbit.
Those up and down suborbital flights have a better chance of, getting down to an affordability level that might appear a bit more reasonable. Will those flights be more affordable to more people anytime soon? I do think the prices can get down to the point of an around the world cruise, something like that. In fairly short order.
So strap yourself in once prices begin to drop. The future of taking a selfie from space is already here.
So we will actually email out a JLI coupon code where you can get a promotional price on these flights. You'll get in your email after. But before we get into that, we want to know, are you permitted to travel to space? Now, it's actually a very interesting question on its own right. So number one, it's perhaps prohibitively expensive. But if you give that much tzedakah, I think you deserve to go to space. But the question is, are space flights prohibited due to Torah's ban on engaging in dangerous activity? So this is an important question to address. Now, Ilan Ramon, when he went up to space, there was a famous rabbi named Rabbi Menashe Hakatan, Menashe Klein, big posek, a big responsa guy. And they asked him, they said, hey, they have a bunch of questions about lighting the menorah in space and doing these different things. And he said, I can't answer because I don't think he's allowed to go to space because it's too dangerous at this point. Now, assuming it gets safer, right? Eventually it'll get safer. How will we know it's safer? Well, if they do it a lot, right? At a certain point, it'll become like flights, regular flights. They do it so many times. It's no longer a rarity. And, we'll get more experience. The question, experience will establish safety. So we'll start with text 1 on page 233. And we're going to get into some very, very interesting questions about this. So we're going to assume right now that it's safe enough. So as a Jew going into space, we're going to have some questions. Julia, want to read text 1 on page 233?
Is orbit spacecraft that orbits Earth every 90 minutes, half of each orbit in daylight and half in darkness, completing about 16 orbits in 24 hours. What is the law regarding the observance of mitzvot that are time dependent? The question concerns mitzvot that apply only during the day, such as the morning Shema, or only at night, such as the evening Shema, or mitzvot that apply at specific intervals, such as Shabbat in the Jewish festival.
All right. So here's our question for today. You go into outer space and you orbit the world many, many times in 24 hours. So you have day, night, right? You're going through day and night. So how does that affect your mitzvahs? Now we're going to, every day a Jew is supposed to say Shema in the morning and Shema at night, right? So what if that's every 90 minutes? How would you do that, right? Furthermore, every 90 minutes is a day in outer space, right? Because you're going through sun, day, and night. So when would you keep Shabbat? When would you keep Shabbat, right? Would that be every 7 intervals of 90 minutes? So this is a very, very interesting question. So when should space travelers orbiting Earth observe the Shabbat? So we're going to give you the different options that rabbis give, and it's a very, very interesting discussion. If you look at exercise 6.1, it's also going to be on the screen, but you can see them here. So we have number 1, never. There's no Shabbat in outer space, right? Shabbat is a mitzvah that was given on Earth. That's option number 1. Number 2, every 90 minutes, right? Every 7th experience of darkness is a day. It's Shabbat, right? So every 90 minutes. Number 3, when Shabbat is observed in the location directly below them on Earth. That's another option the rabbis talk about. Number 4, after 6 24-hour periods, maybe you just keep 24-hour intervals, right? 24-hour intervals. And that would be the Sabbath. Number 5, maybe you go after the launch location. So if you leave from Prescott, whenever it's Shabbat in Prescott, that's when you stop working, you stop doing electronics and whatever you think you do, that's when you keep Shabbat. And finally, number 6, maybe you just go by Israel. These are the different things that people discuss. These are different things we discuss. So now let me go through the logic here. What do you guys think, first of all? Now, I want to know, Shabbat is one of the most serious mitzvahs. You're not allowed to work on Shabbat, not allowed to do electronics, turn on lights, do any type of work which is considered in the Bible. So, that's what we're talking about here. What would you guys say? What would you guys say? Anyone? Every 7 what? Every 7 24-hour periods. Anyone? Well, I wanted to tell you something funny. I had a friend, and I don't remember where he was. There's, somewhere in Iceland or something like that. There's a bridge. And in the summer, Norway, the sun sets, and then 90 minutes later, it comes back up, right? So he was there, and it's 11:30 at night, let's say, and it's bright as day. And it's a big tourist spot, and he goes to the guy and says, "Hey, would you like to lay tefillin?" I said, "Sure." So he lays tefillin on him and does the prayer, which you do only during the day. Then the sun sets, goes beyond the horizon, below the horizon. It's nighttime. 30 minutes later, it comes back up. He goes over to him and says, "Would you like to lay tefillin again?" Right? Because it's a new day. So these are actually very, very interesting discussion. I mean, these discussions are all what's talked about. Anyway, so we have every 24 hours. Yes.
Just wanted to make, this is not really an academic point, because obviously we're going into space, but very, very soon, we're gonna be having, people on Mars.
We're going to get to Mars soon. Mars is a different beast. Yeah, but correct.
Correct answer is that this was a mitzvah that was given for Earth. You're not on Earth, so it really doesn't apply, but a pious Jew is never really exempt from Torah. So you would follow the rabbis will have to come up with some kind of an answer like, well, you follow the calendar from where you were launched, or just as an accommodation, we just follow the calendar in Israel.
All right. Well,
but the basic answer is that you're not on Earth anymore, so it doesn't really apply.
so what are rabbis going to be looking for? They're not going to be looking for what's convenient. They're going to be looking for what the Torah says about it. That's what they're going to be looking for. That's actually where this whole discussion is. We know the Torah says about it, because the Torah says it has laws for everything, everywhere. We know that God created. I mean, God didn't only create planet Earth, he created the whole universe. So that is the question we're going to look at. Now, there are people perhaps could bring precedent to each one. I'll go through some of the logics before anyone else want to comment on this. Yeah.
If Havdalah is a requirement, then I would pick 5 when Shabbat is observed in the place they launched from on Earth. You would have to return to Havdalah to Earth. So that would be my choice.
All right. So you have to return.
Yeah.
All right. Maybe. Oh, well, yeah.
It's a duty.
All right. We're going to go through some of these. Matching is okay. Let's go through some of the logic here, what they're discussing. Again, what we're looking for is we're going to have to be looking for the precedent in the Torah, which we do have some precedent in the Torah.
Australia and Shabbat disappeared.
Australia is a whole nother beast. That's the international timeline, right? That's a whole another subject. That's a good subject, which became very relevant a couple hundred years ago when people started passing through and going through the West and missing a day and adding a day. And there were some people who said, don't go to Hawaii, don't go to Australia, it's too confusing. Where exactly is the date line? That's another discussion, which is actually something where we can actually see the rabbis taking incredible observation of different ancient rabbis and scriptures to understand that. All right, well, let's go through. The logic of the first option is, as you said, well, the Torah says do it on the 7th day. Does it apply here? It applies here, but there's no 7th day, right? There's no 7th day. We're not on Earth. That would be the first, never. That would be the first law. They're similar to what you said, right? Now, the second one says, no, let's be honest. There are days. There's night, and what's day is sun and darkness, right? There are there. Now, option 3, would be very difficult to keep, because if you're positioned over the earth, when you're going at that speed up there, it'd be like, I don't know, Shabbat would be a couple minutes. You go towards Europe, right? Shabbat would be over in a couple minutes. You go towards California, it would get longer and longer, and then it would pass the international dayline and get very confusing. Options 4 and 6, those are both. How should we calculate Earth time? Shabbat has to be kept along Earth's time. The last place we were on Earth, that's how we should calculate. Now, I want to note there are different rabbis, and they really, really do work on this. But most of the rabbis, I've just given you, their conclusion is more it should be tied to Earth's time. A lot say where you left. We have a similar concept if you're going to a place that's always night. You're going to Fairbanks, Alaska, where it's night the whole winter and well for a long part of winter and day for a long part of summer, right? So we have laws like that where we're able to compare and contrast. But yes, this is just our first discussion, and this is to show that yes, the rabbis do talk about this extensively because they know what's going to happen. All right, since you brought up Mars, we'll talk about colonizing Mars, okay? So Mars has a lot of tricky things. We know that there's people talk about the possibility of sustaining human life on Mars. I did hear about a girl who might go there for the rest of her life. That's one of the plans now. I don't think she's Jewish, although I didn't check. But people talk about the ability to actually live on Mars. Now, Mars has a different halachic implication. And this is, we'll read a response about Mars. You want to read text 2 on page 235.
Observance as they arise on the planet Mars. Since Mars presents a particularly unusual and exceptional place. Mars is the 4th planet in our solar system. Its diameter is about half that of Earth, and its gravitational pull is approximately 40% of Earth's gravity. A full day on Mars lasts 24 hours and 37 minutes. On the one hand, if we define the halachic day based on the Martian day and night, the cumulative difference of the extra 37 minutes per day would eventually lead to a situation where Shabbat on Mars would fall when it's Tuesday or Wednesday on Earth. On the other hand, if we ignore the Martian day and define the halachic day strictly according to Earth's 24-hour cycle, people will end up praying Shachar in the middle of the Martian night.
All right, so here's our Mars debate. Now let's just go back for a second. Shabbat is actually a unique thing. A Shabbat is not a matter of religious adherence. Why do we keep Shabbat? Because God kept Shabbat, right? God kept Shabbat 7 days in. So that's why it's something which, like the holidays, the calendar shifts. The 7 days on Earth, they don't shift. It's always 7 days. Never like, oh, on this Shabbat, I'm going to do it on Sunday this week, right? That's how it works on our planet. So when you're leaving, we know that there's a 24-hour period. Shabbat is always going to be 24 hours, right? Always going to be 24 hours. There's a 24-hour period of day 7. And the question is you go in outer space, if you go by outer space by your space shuttle, then you're going to have to keep Shabbat for 90 minutes every 10 hours, right? That's how it is. The other option is we go by Earth time, right? Go by Earth time. Mars is a little bit more tricky because Mars, you can live there, but the day is 24 hours and 37 minutes. 37 minutes is roughly a half hour, right? So it won't take long for those 30 minutes to add on, and Shabbat will keep moving relative to Earth. Or on Earth, it's only 24 hours. So do we keep Shabbat on Mars like Earth every 24 hours, or do we keep it every 24 hours and 37 minutes? So we'll go through exercise 2, and this is what we said before. Shabbat won't align with sunset on Earth. So when is Shabbat on Mars? Option 1, never, right? You're not in the place where you can measure Shabbat. Option 2, the 7th 24-hour cycle after the first Jew arrives, right? So as soon as a Jew arrives, 24 hours, we're going to keep the 24 hours. Option number 3, 7 Martian days after the first Jew arrives, right? So Option five, option four, and these are the different things the rabbis talk about, and it's very, very intricate. We're not going to go into detail today how they try to understand what the Torah would tell us to do on Mars, because we know we need to do the mitzvahs wherever we are, but how do we do it in that specific place and time? Matching one's place of origin Earth, matching Israel, and those are the similar discussions which the rabbis have once we go to Mars. Any questions on that? That's a very good question. That's a very good question. On one hand, we were given the Torah on Earth, and we've never left Earth, so it made it very, very simple, right? We know 7 days, and if someone says, Stan says, I keep Shabbat every seven days times 24/37, we would say that's not a day, right? Earth made it very, very simple. Now, when God gave the Torah on Earth, did he mean that wherever you keep Shabbat should match up with Earth or not? He didn't mean, one thing God didn't mean is he didn't mean you can keep Shabbat whenever you want to calculate 7. Like, let's say one guy says, I keep Shabbat every 7 weeks, right? That's not an option. We know it's 7 days. We know 7 24-hour days on Earth. But because the Torah doesn't address Mars directly, these are the discussions different rabbis and different responses talk about today. Yeah.
In terms of the time Shabbat is observed about the 3 stars?
So Shabbat ends when you can see 3 stars in the sky. However, 3 stars don't just pop up out of nowhere. 3 stars are the rabbis saying, when you see 3 stars in the sky, you know it's for sure night. You know for sure the time is over. It's not like, oh my gosh, there's an amazing thing, 3 stars showed up, right? And then someone says, no, not 3 movie stars, right? 3 stars in the sky. So 3 stars in the sky is to calculate how you know it's for sure night. It's not the significance of the 3 stars. It's just to know, because back then they didn't have clocks, right? So the rabbis would say, how do you know when it's night? Well, if it's cloudy, it's darker earlier. If the moon is out, it's light, right? But when there are 3 stars, you know that it's for sure night. You know for sure Shabbat is over. Okay, let's get on. We're going to get a little bit more practical here. Well, relatively. These questions will be questions that rabbis will debate. And when it happens, we will find ways to do it. We will find how to do it. So now we're going to talk a little bit about gene editing. Gene editing. Now, it's already a practical question. So for starters, when you have surrogacy, the question is, who is the halachic mother? Who is a halachic mother, right? And there's 2 options. There's the genetic mother. She provides the egg. And the gestational mother, she carries the child. Now, who is the mother, right? This is an important question. Now, nowadays we could say, well, whoever wants, right? Whoever wants, whoever adopts, whoever takes them under. But the question's much deeper in Judaism. In Judaism, we know that the identity of a child is based on the mother. So what if the one mother, the genetic mother, is not Jewish, and the gestational mother is Jewish? Is the baby Jewish or not? Or vice versa, right? What if the genetic mother is Jewish and the gestational is not Jewish? Now, this is a famous question. We semi-addressed it in the course a couple years ago. It's an interesting question. And any matters of this, you can ask me, and I will ask rabbis who are experts on the subject. Now, believe it or not, there are some precedents in Jewish law regarding these things, which is a fascinating subject, but we're not going to get into today. But now we're going to take it a step further.
Mitochondrial diseases cover a wide range of conditions caused by genetic mutations. In the UK alone, they affect thousands. Mitochondria are the powerhouses of the cell. They use a process called oxidative phosphorylation to generate energy. But a mitochondrion is a complex piece of machinery, and a lot can go wrong. It takes around 1,500 proteins for mitochondria to function, and problems with many of these can lead to disease. The cell's nuclear DNA creates all but 13 of these proteins. The The rest are coded for by the DNA in the mitochondria themselves. And mutations in either can cause problems. A cell has just one nucleus and many mitochondria. All a cell's mitochondria contain their own DNA. If a mutation affects mitochondrial DNA, some might be healthy, others defective. And different cells can have different numbers of defective mitochondria inside them. That means that some cells may be less affected than others. The diseases caused by damaged mitochondria can also be varied. They can affect any organ or tissue, and they can appear at different times throughout life. For example, Leigh syndrome is the most common type to develop in childhood. It can affect patients in a number of ways, including loss of skills, epilepsy, and problems with muscle function. Mutations in over 75 genes in both nuclear and mitochondrial DNA can lead to this syndrome. So what can be done to tackle mitochondrial diseases like Leigh syndrome? Treating patients is difficult, but in some cases, the disease can be stopped before it's passed on. Mitochondria are inherited from the mother. If the mutation is in the mitochondrial DNA, this inheritance can be blocked. One approach is to combine the nuclear DNA from an affected egg cell with healthy mitochondria from another woman. The embryo would then have nuclear DNA from the original mother and father, and mitochondrial DNA from the egg cell donor. This has led some to call such potential infants three-parent babies. This technique is still very new, but it has recently been approved in the UK. It may be a controversial approach, but techniques like these could finally help combat these devastating diseases.
So what are the halachic implications of mitochondrial transfer? Now, first of all, is it allowed in Jewish law? Number two, who would the mother be, right? Who would the mother be? So here we have both mothers, right? It's not just a mother carrying and a mother's egg, right? It's both two mothers in the actual egg. So we'll read text 3 from Rabbi J. David Bleich, famous rabbi who writes modern responsa, 237.
Technology, whatever can be done, will be done, regardless of moral reservations on the part of some. I fear to comply, even if a moral and conceptual questions that, even if unwelcome, must be answered. In the instance of a mitochondrial DNA replacement, who is the mother? Is the mother the woman who produced the ovum from which the nucleus was taken to the donor of the mitochondrial DNA? If only some defective mitochondrial gene were replaced, who is the mother? As yet unanticipated situations in which replacement genes are donated by multiple women, who is the mother? Is it possible that the infant may have multiple mothers, since each donor of genetic material can be one of each mothers?
All right, so this is a tough question. Now, first and foremost, we don't do this in America yet, but in England it's allowed. Partially, it's a moral question, but in Jewish law, it's quite a difficult question. Now, first and foremost, if we talk about surrogacy, right? Who is the mother? Is the genetic mother the mother, or the gestational mother the mother, right? Now, if we'll say the gestational mother over there, then here we can say the same thing. The genetic mother is not the mother, and we'll follow her status, right, of the gestational mother. The mother that's carrying the baby determines if the baby is Jewish, and she's the mother in Jewish law. However, if the genetic mother is the mother, well, then you're going to run into some questions. Does the baby need to have conversion? Does the baby need firstborn redemption? So the rule is if someone is the daughter of a Kohen, their firstborn son doesn't need to be redeemed. right? Well, here we got two mothers. Which mother do we go by? Which mother does this baby need to honor, right? We have a commandment in the Torah to honor your mother, but the baby has two genetic mothers. These are different questions the rabbis address and discuss with these things. Which mother would get the Mother's Day card if it's genetic mother, right? Well, Hallmark would for sure say both, but in Jewish law, this would make a big difference if one was Jewish and one is not. Well, would the baby be Jewish or not, right? These are tough questions. So, all right. So exercise 6.3, an instance of mitochondrial DNA replacement. Who is the mother? Well, it could be the nuclear mother, the mitochondrial mother, both, or neither. This is yet another example of discussions that rabbis have in modern times, where generally rabbis will say until it becomes really, really prevalent and positive that it looks like it's going to be very, very helpful in saving lives, they'll say, oh, try and avoid it because this is going to cause a mess. But once these things become practical, then these questions are addressed by rabbis nowadays. As we said before, rabbis do not get to just rule by how they feel. They got to go bring proof and discussion and everything and show who would the Torah consider. Well, this leads to our next question, which is also in science. What about artificial wombs? Artificial wombs. So now, here we have the question we just said that if the gestational mother is the mother, right? So then the previous question is not a question. It doesn't matter who's providing the cell, right? Because the mother carrying the baby is the mother. But we said if the mother with giving the nucleus and the mitochondria are the mothers, well, then we're going to run into a problem. If the genetic mother is the mother, then we run into the problem. Here it's exactly the opposite. What if the genetic mother is the mother, if there's an artificial womb, we'll explain what that is soon, then we don't have a question. The mother's whoever provided the egg, right? But if the gestational mother, according to Jewish law, is the mother, well then, who's the mother? Is it possible to have a baby without a mother? And what does that mean, right? So if the genetic mother is the mother, then we don't really have any questions. But if the gestational mother is the mother, does this child have no halachic mother? Now, nowadays, just to explain, this is called ectogenesis, and they've done it partially with some animals, right? They've done it partially with some animals. The idea is if you have a mother who doesn't have a womb for whatever reason, whether she was operated or whether she was born, this is a potential option. You can have the baby form in an artificial womb. Furthermore, it could be an alternative to abortion, right? But you can have the baby just put in an artificial womb. Yet, on the other hand, who is the mother, right? Who's the mother going to be? Now, this would lead to another question in Jewish law, just on a side note. We talk about the golem. And you guys heard about the golem, like the Maharal. Now, the golem is a Jewish mystical concept. It exists in Judaism. And the question comes, if someone makes a golem. Now, a golem, just in Jewish history, is not a rock-made monster. It's actually a human made by humans using Jewish mysticism. Well, what would happen if you would kill that human? Did you murder him? Which brings another question. If you have a robot who acts like a human, have you murdered him if you killed a robot? Right? These are all interesting questions which are applicable to this discussion. So we'll go to text 4. Yes.
I'm concerned we're not really going deep enough here because these are not just academic questions. These things actually come up. These things have been around for a long time, artificial insemination and
Yes.
in vitro, I don't know what the term, fertilization, and the gestational mother and the mother that donates the egg, the DNA mother. These things have been going on now.
Correct.
And they've been answered.
So in Jewish law, so we're just touching today. We're just touching these. AI will get into deeply. They are extensively written on extensively.
Disagree on these things?
There are disagreements between rabbis, and now typically a disagreement between rabbis means a disagreement in how to understand it from the Torah, right? From the Torah's perspective. So typically, when you ask a rabbi who's an expert in this, right? And I've actually had questions that people ask me, and they say, "Hey, am I allowed to do this?" and everything like that. So I always refer them to other rabbis. But a lot of times those rabbis will say, question number one, will they listen to me? Will they listen to me, right? Because if they won't listen to me, what's the purpose in asking? Right? What's the purpose? Will they listen to me? Do you think? And he'll call me, Rabbi will call me and say, these people have requested, are they observant enough that they would listen to me if I guided them? Or are they just asking because human beings might be in doubt and they're looking for confirmation? A lot of times, Jewish people, I always joke that sometimes people, we saw it especially during during COVID, where people will go to a doctor and say, should I get the vaccine or not? Now, stop there for a second. Let's say the doctor answers yes or no, it doesn't matter. The person will be like, what? You're not a doctor. You said the wrong thing. And if I was a doctor, I'd be like, well, then don't ask me, right? Don't ask me, right? You're coming to my opinion. And the same thing with rabbis all the time. People say like, that thing you said or did, you're not a rabbi. Well, it's like, so don't come. Find someone who you can respect, right? So these questions are addressed in great length, and they almost never have a black and white answer because there's so many variables which are necessary to determine what to do and when. So yeah, we're not addressing it today. I saw on the JLI forum, they said, oh, people want more. They want more. They want to know more. And then other rabbis said, well, maybe 5% want more or 10% want more. If you make a course on these, we did give a course a couple years ago on medical questions, which got pretty extensive, but I always said, we cannot answer your actual questions here. We could just give you general ideas that rabbis think about because every case, a lot of times, every single case has its own nuances. All right. Well, yeah. So we're just discussing. Yes.
This is really old, has already been around a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to just the simplest question. If an egg from another woman is implanted into a woman's womb, what answer has the up to now?
So I'll tell you just a seed, and then we'll go on because we got other cases to cover here. But a lot of times, because it's not ultimately clear in Jewish law, and it's one way or another for sure, and it's not ultimately clear, a lot of times rabbis will say you should try to be strict as if they're strict on all ends to make sure you got all your grounds covered. So I'll give you an example. Let's say the genetic mother is the mother and the genetic mother is not Jewish, right? So then if you want the baby to be Jewish, you'd have to convert them, right? Well, let's say the genetic mother is Jewish and the gestational mother is not Jewish. So what would you need to do? You need to convert them just to cover all your bases. Now, there are a lot of potential problems here. What if you have a genetic mother who has two babies from two different surrogates and they get married to each other? Are their children, in Jewish law, considered bastards or not, right? So rabbis typically there will say, well, we don't know for sure that they're siblings, according to Jewish law. We don't know for sure they're siblings, so we can perhaps say we're not going to consider the child a bastard because we don't know for sure that they're considered halachic siblings. So rabbis will usually say, let's try and be as strict as we can be in the first place, preemptively, and we'll try and find leniencies if need be. But we should never try to rely on leniencies preemptively because we don't know. So yes, these are very, very common questions. The rabbi in Bondi, Australia, so the rabbi who got shot, his father-in-law is one of the authorities in the world on this. And he is not a scientist, but he's a brilliant guy. And he understands this science extremely, extremely well. And he has written many books on the subject. But none of the books are, you could just buy and be like, oh, okay, this is what we got to do. These are just the discussions that they have. So there's A, what the Torah considers the mother, but then there's B, what to do practically. That's also a question. What do we do practically? We want to cover all our bases, right? We want to make sure we're doing something smart. So let's read text 4. Text 4 is about ectogenesis.
This theory finds that it will be possible to have a fetus develop from a fertilized egg without implanting the egg in a woman's body. Instead, it will develop inside an incubator that will replicate the conditions of a woman's womb. In this incubator, the embryo will grow from the initial stage of a fertilized egg to the final stage of gestation, when a fully developed fetus will emerge into the world. In such a case, who is the child's mother?
All right, well, so here you have two options. Either you know who the child mother is, or there is no mother, right? One of the rabbis actually, in his response about this, talks about what if you theoretically, this is also a scientific possibility, could put a human egg into an animal. Well, let's say you have this human born from the animal. Is it an animal or a human? Right? It's a tough question. If there's no mother, that's tough. That's tough to manage. But is it an animal or a human? Animals and humans have different rights, right? And then, how do we define what a human is according to Jewish law? So these are actually the discussions that rabbi says, based on that question right there, determining if it's an animal or a human, we should try to avoid using ectogenesis, using artificial fetus, the artificial womb. But anyways, yeah, that's just another question that is discussed by the rabbis. Yes. There were always details which can be a precedent to, but a lot of times they need to be extrapolated. They're not clearly in the Torah. Yeah, so that's what rabbis discuss nowadays. Yes.
That's the nutrients be coming from if it was in an artificial womb. I mean, that would determine if you're getting gestational sustenance from a genetic mother or from a gestational.
Well, the baby needs both things, right? Both things. So what determines motherhood? I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, oh, I have some things to say about this, but I'm like, oh, I really don't have the time right now. Because there's some interesting proofs that rabbis bring from cases in the Talmud and the Torah, fascinating subjects of how. Now, we know that the baby does need both, right? They do absolutely need both. And actually it'll lead right into the next discussion. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If a human egg is placed in an animal uterus, I don't know if that's even possible, but these days anything, say you put in a pig, and the pig develops the fetus and delivers the baby. It's not human. So now do we have somebody that looks like you and I as a human, looks like a human being,
What?
but really is not a human, therefore we can treat him like a slave, we can carve him up and eat him, we can do anything we want because it's not a human.
Well, so that's the question. Would he be human? We don't. No, we don't know. We don't know if he's human or not. That we don't really know if he's human or not. In the Talmud, it does. I can't go into it now, but there are very interesting cases. We haven't successfully had a human in an animal body, but there are some interesting cases where these things are discussed, where there are different proofs biblically or different things which might be related somewhat. Yeah, which are related, and that's what the rabbis are dealing with. All right, yes. So that is that rabbi who writes a response about this. He says, try not to use it because once you get into that discussion, you may be talking about humans who aren't human, right? Which is also an interesting discussion nowadays. Eventually we'll have humanoid robots, right? Can you count them in a minyan? Can you murder them, right? Can you murder them? Can you eat them? Can you beat them up? What if you turn them off and they wake up because they still have love? I don't know, that happened in a few movies probably, right? Right, so these are all very interesting questions, which will lead us into the next one, which is a little bit more practical, a little bit more. Yes, question?
Why do they really want to have? Even if somebody is the carrier for her, she's the one that made the determination of having the child.
Well, the thing is the child does need both. It is absolutely important that the child does need both, and we need to have both points in the process to carry the child. So, I mean, on the genetic side, it's like, this is the baby, right? This is the baby. You're just holding it. But as Stan brought out, you're not just holding the baby. It's not just in a package. So yes, there are arguments to both sides. There are arguments to being almost both of them, right? And it does bring in confusion. But yeah, I can go into it after. I know a little bit about it because I've been a middleman and dealt with some people a little bit. And there's tons of stuff to read on this. But these are questions that are usually for like rabbis who are specialists in these subjects.
There's been a lot of hype around cell cultivated food, but how viable is the industry? What does it entail? And more importantly, will consumers buy one?
Can you do the honours and lift the lid on your creation?
Over a decade ago on The Edge, we reported on the world's first ever cultured beef burger. Unveiled by Professor Mark Post from Maastricht University, it cost around €250,000 to produce. He went on to set up Mosa Meat, a company which aims to bring the burger to the masses, and he's not alone. There are now hundreds of startups developing their own lab-grown products, but just how do they do it? It's a relatively simple procedure, and similar for both meat and plant-based production. For meat, simply take stem cells from animals' tissue, add a nutrient-rich solution, and watch the cells multiply into the three main components of meat: muscle, fat, and connective tissue. Then put the cells into bioreactors, or as they're more commonly known, cultivators. These cells are then separated and rearranged to build a final edible product. This part of the process is called scaffolding, and can be very complicated. A steak, for instance, needs a lot more scaffolding than ground than a burger. The entire process takes between 2 and 8 weeks, but the payoff can be huge. It's estimated that just 1,000 of a pound of cow cells can create up to 4.4 billion pounds of beef. That sounds like an impressive return. So what's the holdup? Well, cost is a big issue. Currently, lab-grown meat is around 40% more expensive than animal. And then there's health and safety concerns. All production must happen in a completely sterile environment because the cells have no natural immunity to diseases. And while traditional meat is nutritionally dense, most of its proteins and minerals are introduced via animal feed. You have to add these nutrients into cultured meat, and it's still unclear whether today's additives provide equal nutritional value in the long term. As a result, regulators can't seem to align with technology. Singapore became the first country in the world to approve cultured meat for human consumption in 2020. The US followed suit 3 years later, and the UK's Food Standards Agency approved use for pet food in early 2024. Italy, meanwhile, has banned the production, sale, and import of lab-grown meat entirely, with the government citing its potential negative impact on the country's farming industry. France and Romania might do the same. The EU so far has not offered any guidance, but if it does greenlight use, it could put Brussels on a collision course with angry farmers. Some critics are calling for more research into the environmental impact of cultured food, especially if production is ramped up significantly. After all, the manufacturing process still requires an energy source, but those championing the industry believe the benefits outweigh the negatives. They say cultured food has the potential to dramatically reduce food waste, tantalize our taste buds with things we've never traditionally eaten, and could provide health benefits by tailoring food to nutritional needs, such as removing gluten or saturated fat without compromising on the taste. According to consulting firm McKinsey, cultivated meat could make up as much as 0.5% of the world's meat supply by 2030, making it a $25 billion global industry.
Anyone some petri dish meat? Well, actually, in Israel, they just came out with a dairy protein milk, which tastes exactly like milk. It's so milky that it says, they put out a warning. They said if you are lactose intolerant, you might not be able to drink it. And it is not made from cows. Okay, well, let's see. Let's get into this discussion. You guys probably already know a little bit of what it's about. But is it kosher? Is it kosher? Is it kosher? Can the Jewish dietary laws allow us to eat this meat? Anyone? What do you guys think? Well, we're going to see. It depends on a lot of stuff. Let's see. Where are we holding? Text 5 on page 240.
In recent years, the question of whether lab-grown meat is kosher has shifted from a theoretical discussion to a practical halakhic issue. Since discussions began in 2013 following the unveiling of the first stem cell-based hamburger by Mark Post, the field has seen several breakthroughs. Today, the cost of producing culture meat is much closer to that of conventional meat, and the product resembles regular meat in appearance, texture, and taste, with the aim of reaching complete similarity. As a result, health-related questions surrounding the lab-grown meat are no longer matters of science fiction. These include, is the product kosher only if derived from a kosher animal? Perhaps even only from a kosher animal that was properly slaughtered? And should it be classified as fleshing or carving?
All right, let's get through some of the discussions here. So first and foremost, the standard practice today is to take it from a living animal. Take it from a living animal. Take the cells from a living animal. Now, in Judaism, actually, we believe in, for Gentiles as well, we are not allowed to eat from a living animal. So here, that's point number one. If it's from a living animal, it's probably going to be problematic. Well, it gets a little bit more complicated than that. Now, if you have a kosher animal, like Jews eat steak, but a lot of people don't know that a cow which is not slaughtered properly is as non-kosher as a pig. We have to eat only kosher slaughtered meat. Only kosher slaughtered meat. I'm actually trying to work out a deal at the meat place around the corner on Gurley to start carrying kosher meat. He came to me, he reached out to me, but it's probably, I hooked him up with some distributors. So now, if the animal died, now I just want to note that one of the big reasons for using lab-grown meat is that you don't have to kill the cow. We don't have to kill cows anymore, right? That's one of the big reasons. Well, that's obviously problematic for us because if it's alive, it's like taking it from a live animal. You're not allowed to take it from eat it from a live animal. What? You're not allowed to take from a living animal. You're not allowed to eat off a living animal. Yeah, right? That's a biblical law. Biblical law, yeah. You're not allowed to eat from a living animal. Aver min achai. Now, presumably in the Bible it says you're not allowed to eat from an animal that's alive. Now, presumably, the example of that would be like taking off a leg from an animal, right? And eating it, and the animal's still alive. But the Torah is very, very strict about it. So if you will take the cells from a living animal, that would be a problem. Unless we could say maybe you could take it from hair, which hair is not considered. So that potentially, right now they take it from blood, so that would be forbidden. But let's say they could take it from hair, which is a part of the animal which is you could have benefit from. Okay, well now, if the animal is dead, died on its own, then in Jewish law it's called a nevela, died naturally. It's already dead. So we just take it from the animals which are already dead. We just need a couple cells. That's also problematic. Jews are not allowed to eat from an animal which was killed in any other way than ritual slaughter. We spoke about the scribe in the beginning of the class. Well, ritual slaughter is very, very similar. There's many, many details in doing it the precise way. All right, so now the solution, well, we'd have to slaughter the animal. Take an animal that's slaughtered and use that, right? Now, the problem with that is it's a little bit less practical because we have to kill the animal, right? And we're gonna have to kill animals for it anyways. Now there's a talk of another option. You can have a lab-grown embryo, right? Like we said before, lab-grown embryo. But that brings in a lot of other issues. Is it considered meat or not, right? Is it considered meat or not? And can we use the cells from a non-kosher embryo? Another thing is maybe we can use its hair. So these are the different discussions which would determine if you're allowed to take this meat or not. Now, this brings another discussion. Well, if it's lab-grown embryo, maybe we could make lab-grown pigs, right? Lab-grown pigs and eat pig meat, and it's not even really meat. Now, it's actually interesting that in the Jewish tradition, the word for pig in Hebrew is, anyone know what the word is? Chazer. Chazer means return. Now, a pig is the only animal. One of the actually fascinating things in the Torah is when Moses teaches the Jewish people about the animals, he says, Zot hachaya, this is the animals that you're allowed to eat. The Jewish tradition is, why does it say this is the animals? Because Moses actually showed them the animals. And it was a miracle. In the middle of the desert, they have these animals. But Moses is a miraculous guy. Now, in his list there, he lists all the animals that have split hooves and chew their cuds. He lists any animal that split hooves and chews its cud is kosher. And then he lists all the animals that only have one sign. Either they only chew their cud, or they only have split hooves. Till today, those are the only animals known to science, the ones listed in the Torah, the only animals known that have one of those things. A lot of the ancient rabbis would say, like, wow, this is pretty incredible. Even 1,000 years, pretty incredible. Moses, in that time, knew every single species in the world, there would only be these animals. Now, one of those is a chazer, a pig. A pig does not chew its cud, but it has split hooves. It has split hooves. And in fact, it's the only one that has split hooves and doesn't chew its cud. The rest chew their cud but don't have split hooves, right? So now the Midrash says something very interesting. The Midrash says, why is the chazer called a chazir? Return. Because eventually it will become kosher. When Mashiach comes, it will become kosher. Now the rabbis talk about, well, how could that be? The Torah will never change. The Torah says it will never change. How could it be that it changes? Well, they give different options as explanations. One of the rabbis says, well, the Torah will never change, but what if the science of pigs, change? What if pigs start chewing their cud? Or a species starts chewing their cud? That will make them kosher, right? Now, what if you have like bacon and Mashiach comes right now? Can you eat it? That for sure not, because it wasn't kosher slaughtered, right? It wasn't kosher slaughtered. Well, some would say maybe if we raise the pig in a embryo, right? A artificial embryo, maybe that would be kosher. Maybe that wouldn't even be considered meat. So these are the different discussions that they have regarding this. Now, lab meat already exists. So I just give you an example. The OU, which is the biggest kosher organization in the world. And of course, in Israel, lab meat, I mean, they're always at the front of the technology things of different things like this. So there's a company called Super Meat. And in 2023, they were certified by the OU. The OU's conditions were the cells had to be taken from a kosher slaughtered animal. Because they said, oh, we don't know. We're going to play on the safe side. Kosher slaughtered animal. Furthermore, they also grow their meat from cells extracted from a kosher lab-grown animal embryo. But the OU says we're going to call it meat. We're going to call it fleishik. In Jewish law, you can't eat milk with meat, right? So they do not allow people to eat milk with meat, even in the lab-grown embryo meat, just to play on the safe side. But this is another great discussion which rabbis had right now in 21st century, and things are, constantly expanding and changing as we speak. Yeah.
The people creating this in the lab, just as with dairy, kosher milk has to be, if I'm correct, milked by a Jew. Is that correct?
That's a loaded question. So Jewish law is that kosher milk in the olden days, people would sell milk from their farm, and sometimes they would sell non-kosher milk, and they would mix it. You didn't know the different types of milk. So Jewish law is milk has to be milked. There has to be a Jew there making sure that there has to be a Jew there making sure that indeed it's cow milk, right?
So is that not?
Now, I just want to note, in the United States, there was a famous rabbi, some rabbis, and they said, what about the FDA? In the olden days, it was really easy to give pig milk instead of cow milk. I mean, you had a cow, you had a pig, you just mix them up, whatever it is, whatever you had that day. But nowadays, if you do that, you'll be shut down by the FDA and you'll get in a lot of trouble. So what they said is based on that is we can say that all big company milk in the United States, is technically kosher. Because we know they're not going to put non-kosher animals. I mean, they have big farms. But if you go to Chino Valley and a guy is selling milk on the side of the street, raw milk, you shouldn't buy it because you can't, that's where the rabbis made a decree. You can't really know from a small personal farm. So that's, now, in these places here, would they have to have certification? Would they have to have a rabbi there? Absolutely, yes. You'd have to have a rabbi. The OU would have to be there, make sure there's a rabbi. They're not mixing things up. And that goes with, the meat store over here. I told them, I said, if you want to have kosher meat, You cannot open a package. You open a package, you can't do it anymore. Because once you open a package, you're not going to know what to do, and people will not know if you're reliable anymore. If you want to open a package, you have to have an observant Jew there who's observing, no pun intended, who's observing, making sure you're following the rules. That in Hebrew is called a mashgiach. Every restaurant in LA, New York has a mashgiach. Some of them require a mashgiach tamidi, a constant rabbi or somebody there making sure that everything's fine. And some have a walk-in, goes in and out. It depends on what you're serving, what you're cooking, you know. Yeah, okay. Let's get to something we're going to cover a little bit deeper because this stuff we just kind of just dabbled in. The question of the day, can AI be used to answer halachic questions? Artificial intelligence. All right. So first of all, what do you guys think? Anyone? What do you think? Sometimes depend. No. All right. So we've concluded going into some present day discussions. I want to say, yes, we didn't go to them in depth. We just kind of brought up the questions which are discussed. We've taken a course about rabbinic responsa, and we see, what it takes to generate responsa, to find different precedents, all the different rules that we said. Can AI do that? Well, first and foremost, in lesson 2, we said you have to be able to determine reality, right? Remember, we went through all those cases there, rabbis talking to scientists or researching things, at least on a basic level. So now for that on its own, and we talked a lot about that, AI, as of now, still has what they call AI hallucinations, right? AI hallucinations. AI hallucination, AI is really great, and now you Google something and you can know all about it instantly. But their AI hallucinations are quite common, where AI brings up information, sounds very authoritative, but it's flat out wrong. I mean, we've seen lawyers embarrass themselves and politicians embarrass themselves, all sorts of different things. There's some famous cases. Someone asked, what's the world record for crossing the English Channel entirely on foot? And AI answered. When was the Golden Gate Bridge transported for the second time across Egypt? And AI famously provided a date. The authors of this course, they said, who was the first rabbi who ate matzah on Rosh Hashanah? And it provided a rabbi. Now, it's interesting that rabbi actually said on Passover, it's a mitzvah to eat matzah. He says, but it's a tradition to eat a little matzah on Rosh Hashanah, not like Passover. And AI said it authoritatively, this rabbi ate matzah on Passover, right? So we see how tricky AI hallucinations are. Now, we know that as AI goes on, and if you haven't heard me talk about it, I talk about it all the time. AI will get better. Will get better, and it'll start programming itself much faster than human beings can. But there's another problem that we'll run into is foreign influence. You know, when you go to a rabbi, if someone comes to me and asks me a question, should they, do IVF, surrogate child, or whatever it is, I assume they're not asking me because I'm a scientist, right? And I assume they're not asking me because I'm a nice guy, because that's not why you go to a rabbi. Hopefully, they're asking me because they want to know valid Jewish law, and I can either answer them or connect them with somebody who can. Now, AI picks up algorithms all over the internet. If you haven't seen it, there's all sorts of different apps. So it's always really, really funny, actually, how they sometimes mispick up things. And a lot of times they might pick up from someone who's a rabbi who's not correct. He wrote a response which is simply wrong, not according to Jewish law. Maybe it was convenient for him. And there are plenty of things like that online which can be a foreign influence, bring from another religion, another moral code, another something, another movie, and those things would cause AI to mess up as well. My kids, there's an app called Sora, which you upload your picture of yourself, a video of yourself, and you can say, make me skydiving or whatever it is. So my kids always find it funny how it mispronounces Jewish words, mixes up Jewish concepts, because it's picking up from online. Not every source online is good. I always tell people say, oh, Prescott has 2,000 Jews. You know how I know Prescott has two? You know how AI knows Prescott has 2,000 Jews? Because that's what I wrote online on my website. That's what they picked up, right? Now, I'm not saying they do or don't, but AI a lot of times can run in circles. But let's say AI improves. Let's say AI improves, and it will improve. And it will get better. And it will be able to say, you can tell AI, I want to know only the true Torah sources. Can AI give halachic rulings? Well, so let's take a little further. You have simple questions, right? You have simple questions. For example, what blessing do I make on an apple? Right? That's a simple question. That's in the books. For that, you don't need a rabbi necessarily to go and answer your question. You might be able to go to AI, or you want to know, can I drink almond milk with eating meat at the same time I'm eating meat? Right? AI can answer those questions because just quoting from the book. These are essentially things, just like a Jew. I encourage you to study Torah, and you don't have to ask a rabbi everything, right? You can study your own stuff. You can get your own bracha chart and know which bracha to say. The real question is, when questions become complex? And that's what we've been discussing in this course. We mentioned earlier that a lot of the questions in this course responsa are not the simple questions where you go and you say, Rabbi, is this kosher or not? It's complex questions where there are a lot of variables need to be brought in. Now, in Jewish law, there's an idea that a student is not allowed to rule on a complex question in front of his teacher. In other words, if your teacher is still alive, preeminent teacher, and you want to rule on the complex question, you got to give it to him. You got to do it out of respect. You give him the question. And we'll read text 6 on page 243.
Never permitted to issue elected rulings in the vicinity of his teacher, unless his teacher passes away or grants him explicit permission. Some write that a student may issue rulings that appear in existing codified work, even in his teacher's lifetime, so long as a student doesn't rule using his own reasoning or by comparing one case to another.
So a student is not allowed to come up with responsa in front of his teacher, but he can quote the written works, right? If you go to a rabbi and you say, hey, I want to know, am I allowed to do this on Shabbos? He could say, it says over here, you're allowed to do it or you're not allowed to do it. But the idea of comparing and contrasting and drawing what we call a psak, that is something that is not necessarily AI can do. You might remember lesson 3. We talked about the payment in the blood libel case, right? And the question was, should they pay the payment, right, in Regensburg or not? Can they put a tax on others? Or we had the question of the hot air balloon going over the sukkah, and we said, well, this has to do what's considered a tent in Jewish law. Those ideas are ideas that not necessarily, just like a student cannot do it in front of his teacher, AI not necessarily could do that. Also, we spoke about another case over here. We spoke about getting married on Shabbos, right? Would AI be able to rule and say, well, you're not allowed to get married on Shabbos, but remember this last week, you're not allowed to get married on Shabbos, but if this case here where they already prepared and everything like that, because Kavod Abrius, we want to respect her and we want to help the orphan, we'll allow them to get married. Remember, we compared it to a case of a guy on his deathbed who wanted to do a transactional move in order to give something. We said, well, in that case, the rabbis make an exception. Here also we can make an exception. Or we spoke about the prayer, right? We spoke about the Jews in Borisov. They wanted to know that their fathers wanted them to pray the old way. They wanted to pray the new way. And we had all those questions. And the Alter Rebbe said, well, for the sake of peace, we're going to rule in a counterweight here. Or we had last week, we had the question about the tefillin that were going to be burnt, but the person would be sick otherwise, would get more sick. Would AI be able to rule those sensitive issues? Last week, the whole class was called the fifth chelik, the 5th section of Code of Jewish Law, understanding humanity, understanding how people work, understanding certain situations. Remember, we had the guy who said, am I allowed to Am I allowed to make drink 4 cups of milk instead of 4 cups of wine, right? Would AI be able to say, boy, this guy must need money for his Passover meal? If he can, he must need enough money for me. AI wouldn't be able to do that. Furthermore, we have the idea of divine assistance, right? We spoke in the first lessons, we said when a rabbi is put in the right place, he has to be siyata d'shmaya, he needs the help from heaven. So there are a lot more than just answering a question for AI. There's all these other kind of layers which are beyond just answering the question of what right and wrong. But let's say AI could do that. Let's say AI, let's raise the stakes over here. Okay, we got our rabbis on one side, AI, what's it called? Altman and Musk and everyone on the other side. Raise the stakes here. What if AI could do all of that? Right? What if AI could do all those counterweights and everything like that? Would AI still be able to be a rabbi? Now, how do we know? How does a rabbi become a rabbi? A rabbi becomes fluent in the Jewish laws. He has to answer a lot of questions, a lot of testing, right? He has to answer a lot of questions, a lot of testing. What if AI was fully proficient in that, and we were able to see AI answer thousands of questions, thousands of theoretical questions or practical questions over time? Would AI be able to be a rabbi? Suppose AI can achieve all that a rabbi can and more. What then?
There's soul. There's no soul.
Well, let's get even deeper. What if we cannot see the difference between having a human element or not having a human element? What if we can not see the difference? In other words, for all practical purposes, AI has a human element. What is the human element? Well, all our sensors say it has the human element, right? That's true, but AI, so it's interesting. I don't want to get too much into AI because I actually like the subject of AI. I believe it's very, very Jewish, very Mashiach-dic. I think AI is amazing. AI is going to put a lot of things out of business. And AI already has done phenomenal things. And it's true, it started by the person who programmed it. But once AI starts programming itself, it can program way beyond a human being. I'll give you an example. There was a certain type of plasma that human beings haven't been able to make for a certain cancer treatment. AI was able to do it in 20 minutes, right? So AI starts programming itself, starts taking over the world. And you know what? There's no evil people trying to run it, right? Everyone becomes wealthy, and there's no more greed and anger, right? That's theoretically possible, right? In fact, that's in the Jewish prophecies of Mashiach coming, right? There'll be, if there's enough wealth, there won't be jealousy at a certain point. Everyone will be verstupt with their own stuff, right? So can AI at that point replace rabbis? So now we're going to get into a slightly different subject, which is going to make it even more fascinating. So now in the 2nd century, there was a dispute between Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and the rest of the rabbis. We're not going to get into the dispute because the details are not so relevant, but it was a certain object, pure or not pure. That was the dispute. And most of the rabbis said, I believe it's impure, and Rabbi Eliezer said it's pure. Well, majority rules, right? Well, let's see. What did Rabbi Eliezer do? So we'll read text 7.
Brought with every imaginable argument, but the sages did not accept them. Said Rabbi Eliezer, if my ruling is correct, let this carob tree prove it. Suddenly the carob tree was uprooted and moved a distance of 100 cubits. Others say 400 cubits. No proof can be brought from a carob tree, the sages retorted. Rabbi Eliezer said to them, if my ruling is correct, let the stream of water prove it. Immediately, the stream of water began to flow backwards. No proof can be brought from a stream of water, the sages responded. He continued to urge, if my ruling is correct, let the walls of the academy prove it. The walls inclined to fall. Rabbi Yehoshua rebuked the walls, saying, scholars are engaged in halakhic dispute. What right have you to interfere? The walls did not cave in completely in deference to Rabbi Yehoshua, nor did they resume their upright position in deference to Rabbi Eliezer. They are still standing, thus inclined. Rabbi Eliezer said to them, if my ruling is correct, let heaven prove it. A heavenly voice proclaimed, why do you argue with Rabbi Eliezer? His rulings are always correct. Rabbi Yehoshua rose and exclaimed, it is not in heaven, Deuteronomy 30:12. What did he mean? Said Rabbi Yermiah, since the day the Torah was given at Mount Sinai, we ignore heavenly voices, for you have already written in the Torah, follow the majority. Exodus 22.
All right, so here we have this fantastic story in the Talmud. It's so much to unpack. But let me summarize it. The rabbis are arguing with Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says, if I'm right, let a voice come from heaven. It's like, let God say who's right. And a voice comes from heaven and says Rabbi Eliezer's right. And the rabbis turn to him and they say, sorry, the Torah is not in heaven. The Torah was given to Jewish humans to understand and to implement. It wasn't given in heaven. The voice from heaven, that's pretty good. You can imagine the walls falling down, the Carib tree of Meridian. It's miraculous. But the rabbis say, no, that's not what God wants. God wants us to follow the Torah. The Torah is down here on this earth. It needs to be decided on this earth. So here you got two ways to go. You have the majority rule, and you have miracles happening. That's Rabbi Eliezer versus the other rabbis. What did the Talmud teach us? The other rabbis tell them great tricks, miraculous tricks, supernatural. But the Torah is not in heaven. The Torah is down here. Now, so let's take AI for a second. Can AI determine the Jewish law in a difficult situation? Well, AI might be very, very smart, but whose job is it to determine the Jewish law? Not AI, humans. So AI can't take the place of humans because by definition, the law has to be determined by humans. The law is not determined by an alternative system. AI is like the heaven, it's a cloud, right? So here you have the Talmud telling us that it actually has to be determined by humans with souls, regular rabbis, etc., etc. All right, but let's take it a little bit further. So here you have the majority takes precedence. So now let's say you have AI saying all these things that are right and all the rabbis saying something else. Who's going to be right? The rabbis, right? The majority rules. The Torah is down here in this world for us to decide how to implement it and how to understand it. Now this leads to the famous scholar, the Barbanel. Here's the rationale for this. If you want to read text 8, Marcia. Oh, Cindy, sorry, text 8.
Prophet were decided to resolve doubts regarding the mitzvah of the Torah. The sages would grow lax in their study, analysis, and understanding of the Torah. They would no longer toil over it each day, nor would they push themselves to uncover its depth. Instead, relying on the interpretations and ruling of the prophets. Even the insights they did attain through careful investigation would remain uncertain in their eyes, as they would hesitate to trust their own conclusions without hearing confirmation from a prophet. But since the prophets are not entrusted with interpreting the Torah and its commandments, the sages are compelled to apply themselves to study deeply and to trust their conclusions, because they have nothing to rely on other than their competent minds.
So here the Barbanel says something very interesting. He said, if God wanted us to keep the Torah properly, he could have set up prophets to tell us, do this, exactly that. This is what God says. That's what God says, right? It's kind of like what Moses was doing. We spoke about a few weeks ago on First Fridays, what Moses was doing when he was giving judgment to the people. Everybody listened. Everybody bought whatever Moses said. The prophets, God could appoint prophets. They'll tell us exactly what to do, and we'll follow it exactly. We'll do it in perfection. But that's not what God wanted. Torah is about the connection we have with God, right? Torah is about the connection we have with God. God would want us to toil with it, to connect to it, to make it our way of thinking. If he would have just given prophets, they would just override our minds and hearts, and we would just follow them just sheepishly. God did not want us just to follow the Torah. He wanted us to internalize it. He wanted to bring the inner dimensions inside of us. He wanted a human fusion with godliness, godly information, the Torah, and he wanted a human fusion with godly information, the Torah, and us. This is even more why we don't seek the answers from heaven. We don't seek the answers from heaven because if we get them from heaven, we'd lose the human partnership side. God doesn't want the Torah to be kept. He wants it to be kept by us. He wants us to keep it, us to know it. It's not about getting something done. The relationship is us. He's looking for us. AI, therefore, would take away this intellectual effort, right? AI would take away this intellectual effort. It would no longer internalize. Our Judaism would say, hey, I don't know if any of you guys saw those comedy videos where people are like using AI for different things. And then it says, sorry, your free subscription has run out. And they just like freeze. They don't know what to do. It's like a futuristic videos. So AI would take away our side in the partnership with God. And that's why we don't, so connection loss, limitation of AI, connection loss. It undermines the intellectual effort that God desires from us. All right, now until this point, you might think that AI ruling is only wrong only wrong in the procedure, right? But it could still be right, and we'd still, just happens to be, you could follow AI or follow your own brain. But we're actually going to see that Jewish law, the idea of Jewish law is even deeper. Text 9, if you read text 9. Marcia?
49 arguments that an object was ritually pure, and 49 arguments that the object was ritually impure. Moses said before him, Master of the universe, how long will we struggle to arrive at a clear decision? God responded, follow the majority. If the majority rules impure, it is impure. If the majority rules pure, it is pure.
So here it says in the Midrash, it says a fascinating thing. Moses gets the laws, and he sees there's many, many ways of interpreting the law. Many, many different ways of interpreting the law. So what is the correct law? So what does God tell him? Achri Rabim Lahatas, you follow the majority. Now, Moses was asking him how to decide what the law is. It's not always clear in the Torah. And we have to follow the rules of the Torah to understand how to determine the law. And then it comes to a certain point, there might be 49 different ways of interpreting it. What do? We follow the majority of rabbis' understanding. And this is actually how the Sanhedrin and rabbis resolve their disagreements. Ultimately, it comes down to majority rule. So the true psak din, you might think Jewish law is like math. There's the right answer and the wrong answer. Math doesn't follow majority rules. Although in Congress, a lot of times it does, right? A lot of times they say, okay, majority rules, this is what's going to happen. But math, right, has a correct answer and every other answer is wrong. Torah is not like that. Torah, through Torah study and through the rules in the Torah and following the different rules of Torah, we actually build the destiny of the Torah. We create the halachic conclusion. This is what God tells Moses. He says, I don't just give the answer right away. You have to go and figure it out and determine it. You guys down there on earth are the ones who determine it. So AI is just one voice, right? It's just one voice. It's not, it's just one voice. And therefore, an AI doing that, even if it does the right method, it might still be wrong because there are multiple ways, and the destiny of how we determine the Jewish law ultimately comes through the study of Torah. Now, you might think after this that I'm totally against AI, and Jewish law is totally against AI. And I'm, what do you call it, a Luddite, right? Against technology. Rabbis are Luddites. We follow the Jewish law, and we follow the rabbis, and that's it. Now, just to go back a second. So we said AI, can it determine the right answer? It can determine a lot of information. But the right answer is determined through the Torah process. And AI cannot do the Torah process because the Torah process was not given over to AI. So now let's get back to the story that we said there. All right. So here we have Rabbi Eliezer. He disagrees with the majority rule of rabbis. Right? Rabbi Eliezer disagrees with the majority rule of rabbis. He did, and they say, what do they tell him? He says, let a voice come from heaven. Have any of you guys heard voices from heaven lately?
You get committed.
Good. Okay, good. You weren't supposed to. But, actually, the truth is, it says in the Mishnah that we all hear voices from heaven every day, and has a subconscious effect. Our soul hears it. There's a subconscious effect. But the Talmud there is talking about literally hearing a voice from heaven, right? They didn't have loudspeakers and drones and whatever it was, right? They heard a voice from heaven. Rabbi Eliezer's right. And what do they say? Sorry, the Torah, the decision is not given in heaven, it's given down here. Where do we know that from? The Torah itself says that. Rabbi Eliezer didn't know that? He didn't know the Torah? He didn't know the Torah says it's decided down here? He didn't know that? Was he confused? Let me tell you something. He was a big rabbi. He was a very, very big rabbi. So big that God said he was right. He didn't know that Jewish law is decided down here. So let's broaden the question a little bit. We spoke about the Rambam a little bit. We're almost done. We spoke about the Rambam. The Rambam, one of the books that Maimonides wrote is the Book of Mitzvahs. Book of Mitzvahs. Now, there was a rabbi named Rabbi Moshe Mikutzi, who was a 13th century French rabbi, who also wrote a book of mitzvahs. It's called the Sefer Mitzvahs Gedolos, and it's very, very similar to the Rambam, but it has a few differences. It's a book of list of mitzvahs, and he has certain times where he quotes a different verse and says, no, the mitzvah is a little different than the Rambam is saying. And here's one example. He doesn't always say why, but here's one example why he says why. If you could read text 10 on page 250.
This is a prohibition that Israel should not become arrogant when God bestows goodness upon them, saying it is their own strength and effort that brought success, failing to acknowledge the kindness of God. I have expounded on humility in public many times, but I didn't associate it with this particular verse, nor did I intend to include it as one of the 613 commandments. Maimonides did not list it among the prohibitions. When I was documenting the prohibitions and reached this verse, I had a dream in which I saw the following words. Behold, you have forgotten the essence. Beware, lest you forget the Lord your God. In the morning, I reflected on it. I realized that this was indeed a foundational idea about fearing heaven. So I decided to include it.
So here you have this story, kind of problematic story here, right? He's writing this book, and there's one mitzvah that he's not in, one verse he's not including, and he has a dream. And the dream, God or someone speaking to him and says, hey, you forgot this. You got to put this in. He says the next morning he woke up and he reflected on it. He said, yeah, I should include this. How could that be? The Torah is not in heaven. The Torah is not in dreams. It's not in fantasy world. The Torah is down here. We got to fight it out. We got to think it through. So the answer the Rebbe gives a very interesting answer. He said he didn't decide to do it because the dream said he had to do it. It triggered him to think about it. Life is like that. Life makes you think about all sorts of different things. The voices in heaven every day, why can't you hear them? It says, one of the commentators says, if you would hear the voices from heaven every day, you wouldn't have a choice. It'd be too awesome. You would just follow them. They trigger your soul a little bit. They tickle your soul, which tickles your brain a little bit. You want to do some good things. Why do you want to do it? You're not forced to do it. You do it because you're reflecting on how you feel, how your soul mechanism works. So here, going back to Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer wasn't saying, let's follow the voice in heaven. He was saying, come on, rabbis, listen to heaven. Look, take my opinion seriously. All these different things are happening. You should at least take my opinion seriously. He wasn't saying the Torah is in heaven, the rulings in heaven, and they were saying the rulings on earth. He was saying, if all these miraculous things happen, you should at least listen to my opinion a little bit. You should at least consider it. The rabbis said no. In that circumstance, they said, no, we considered it enough, majority rules. Same thing with Rabbi Moshe Mikutzi. He dreamed the verse that he didn't plan to include. It wasn't that. It wasn't that. He had a dream, and that forced him to do it. It made him reconsider if he should put it in or not. And he thought about it and decided to do it. The same can be said with AI. What can AI do? What role can AI do? AI can't rule, but can aid the rabbi. It can help with the research. It can bring up sources, variables, conclusions that you may have not thought about. Then you can take those, absorb them, and think about them and use them out. And the same thing with Torah study. I know people who have long discussions about Torah with AI, and they learn so much information. AI can't make a ruling on Jewish law, but can provide that information. Now, let's say someone says, oh, great, I used to study 1 hour a day. Now I can use AI and study in 5 minutes, right? That's not the purpose of AI, to get you to study less. AI can aid you to study more, to become more of a mensch, to study more Torah. AI can assist you, but it can never replace your Torah study. It can assist you, it can never replace your Torah study. Now, I want to mention, I always say this, that nowadays we live in the AI era. It's going to replace a lot of things. But eventually it's going to come to a certain point that people are so high off AI, they're going to get bored of life. They're going to get bored of life because AI can give you a better vacation than a vacation, eventually. AI can give you can make your taste buds feel better than food, right? But you know what you're all going to do? Everyone's going to walk by and going to see someone studying Torah with passion. And they're going to say, man, that guy's alive. I want to do that. I want to study Torah. I want to get more spiritual. I want to pray more. And that's what we're going to do. So AI is not going to stop us from studying Torah. It's actually going to push us to take it to a new level, to a new height. In conclusion, AI can assist in deepening the individual's Torah study. Thank you for joining. We're almost done with the course. And over the past few weeks, we really went through a lot of different generations, a lot of different ideas of understanding how rabbis issue rules throughout history. And now the study, one thing that we can learn for sure is the question and answer in Torah continues forever. And we always have to occupy our mind with more and more Torah and more studying and going deeper and deeper and fostering this deep personal connection that we all have with Hashem.
But technological advance is not foreign to, but woven into its very blueprint. Every innovation awaits our responsible and ethical use, aligning it with its original divine purpose. This mission lies at the heart of contemporary and futuristic rabbinic response. 2. One significant contemporary question is whether artificial intelligence can be used to render halachic decisions. As it currently stands, AI hallucinates and, depending on the model, draws from sources that are outside the Torah framework. These limitations make it unsuitable for halachic guidance. 3. If AI were trained exclusively on valid Torah texts and equipped with safeguards against inaccuracy, it might be usable as a tool to convey basic halachic information. However, relaying information is not the same as issuing a ruling. A genuine halachic ruling arises when the answer is not clear-cut, when precedent is lacking, when sources disagree, or when conflicting values must be carefully weighed. These instances call for the ability to compare cases with nuance, to see which values take precedence, and to respond not just to the question, but to the questioner. These are deeply human capacities. 4. Even if AI masters these techniques, it would still be disqualified from issuing halachic rulings. The Torah mandates that halachic rulings emerge through human deliberation. If even heavenly voiced miracles and prophecy are excluded from halachic authority, then surely AI, no matter how refined, cannot assume that role. 5. The goal of Torah is not merely correct behavior, but a lived relationship with God, cultivated through consistent intellectual engagement with His wisdom and will. Relying on shortcuts for answers forfeits the sacred bond that comes from wrestling with Torah's complexities. 6. When a human being brings Torah to bear on new realities, divine wisdom fuses with human creativity. This sacred convergence fulfills the very purpose of creation. Turning to heaven or AI for answers undermines this valuable goal. 7. Like Rabbi Moshe of Kusi, who reconsidered a ruling after a dream, halachic experts may use AI as a prompt for reevaluation, but a human mind must weigh the issues, decide the outcome, and bear responsibility for the ruling. 8. Tools like AI may enhance our study of Torah, help us uncover new sources, or clarify difficult passages. But they must never reduce the time, effort, or devotion that characterize true engagement with God's wisdom.
All right, here's our next course. Next course is going to be in the end of April. Your Judaism holds a message for the world. Once the world wants to hear, it's time to unlock it. It's called For All Humankind. It's about the Jewish message to the world, the greater world and universe. There's another course after that that'll be in the summer on the Constitution, the Jewish effects on the Constitution. And thank you much for joining. I hope you enjoyed the course. There's actually a video, but I don't have it here. A video of the new course, video presentation, but you'll get the information through email or whatever it is. Hope you can come. Purim is on Monday night, Tuesday. We're gonna have a big party Tuesday. Purim Megillah reading. Even if you don't like to party, it's a mitzvah to hear the Megillah and do all those things. The 4 mitzvahs of Purim are hearing the Megillah, giving money to a poor person, giving food to a friend. We do that all here, as well as eating a feast. We're going to do something unprecedented in Prescott. We're going to try and make kosher sushi over here. It's kind of a good thing, big deal. And also, of course, as always, if you want to help sponsor yourself and other people, it's very helpful. Make it a really, really great party. Celebrate Purim. And yeah, I don't think there'll be any AI representation. Actually, there are some AI. There's like this Megillah slideshow that you can play during the Megillah reading. So there's like a bunch of AI versions now. But they have an AI Lego version, an AI human version. But I was like, can I take pictures of people in my community and make an AI version of them acting in it? I couldn't figure out how to do that though, and probably next year. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming and have a wonderful evening. I hope you enjoyed.